if I'm a greens chairman and I'm interviewing somebody who spent 3 or 5 years in sales, had been a superintendent or was on that trajectory for a while, and then went that pass and then went back in, I'm thinking this person knows who to talk to for products, how to buy, how to do budgeting, has now seen the other side of the industry, again, the other side of that ecosystem in a way that could only bring value to the club. Like that's, to me, that would be amazing that you're bringing in that skill set.
Welcome to Leadership on the Links, the podcast that showcases innovators in golf course management and the issues they face. I'm your host, Tyler Bloom. In Leadership on the Links, you hear the stories of people shaping the industry from their first swing to their dream match. You'll feel like you're on the course playing with your most inspiring colleagues, having great conversations, digging into insights and sharing a few laughs. Our industry is changing. As a leader, you need to keep up on everything from trends to technology to best practices. Together, we'll continue to build world-class clubs and teams. Let's get to it. Enjoy.
So I'm super pumped to be joined today by a longtime friend, ambassador of Tyler Bloom, Mr. Tom Valentine, and a really interesting story when I was still back in my heyday of being a superintendent, not in the too distant future ago. Tom was one of the early adopters of what I had suggested I was going to start a business on. And I kind of, every time Tom would stop in and be like, what do you think about this? And I'd get a little bit more encouragement. And then I think one day I just said, hey, I'm doing it, man. And
yeah, you 100%. It was clear on the first day I met you that you were passionate. You're a passionate person in general, whatever you're doing, and committed. I'm pretty sure I remember this, that even one day I remember like you using your own credit card to buy gas for equipment because
oh man,
things were kind of skinny a little bit on on budget down there at Sparrows that I'm like, all right, this is a guy who's all in. If he's actually doing that, he's like, we just got to get it done. And when you suggested that business idea, clearly you had been thinking about it, and why wouldn't you encourage, somebody who has all that energy and vision like that to do that? So that's how this industry evolves, right? With people who kind of just stayed on an idea and then boom, make it happen.
Well, you may call it committed. This guy's just looking to get it done. Most people would say that's stupid. Why would you ever do that? So.
It was too good of like, all right, we always joke like, what's the news story? What's the bio look like when you think about it? And this case, be like, all right, here's a guy, I think you just had your first daughter, your first child, he's just had a kid. He's starting out. He's going to like, you know what? I'm just going to throw and take the leap and do it. That's awesome. I mean, it's fun. There's been a lot of people like myself, I'm sure, that have enjoyed watching your ride. And, so it's really cool that you did that.
Well, for those that don't know, Tom, I'll let you kind of give maybe the Cliff Notes version. It's probably hard to summarize that. We could spend 45 minutes just talking about your background, how you got into what you're doing, greenkeeping in your blood.
Yeah.
So to speak.
Yeah. Okay. Well, try to make this brief, but I'm a Valentine, Tyler, so you may have to reel me in. Anyway, so yeah, I grew up in the industry. My father was superintendent. My grandfather was superintendent, and grew up at Merion Golf Club. And I've used this analogy before, and I think it's a fair analogy. It was very normal. It was like normalized for us because it was kind of like the family farm, basically. Didn't really think a whole lot about it until I got older. But, like I said, we didn't own the farm, but it was basically what we did day in, day out. Like I did what my father did, what his father did type of thing. You just got up and did it. And we joked that we had reverse thoughts about summer. Summer would come. Every kid in school would be pumped. We would be like, oh no. We got to get up at 5. We got to get up at 5:30 and go in. This is brutal, right? And so just didn't really enjoy the time there, but didn't have the perspective on it, of course, at that age. So pretty much grew up from the time I could lift the divot bucket. I would jokingly tell these stories too that I talked to every kid in my neighborhood to come in after after school, we'd go over and follow the divot trailer up and down the fairways and fill divots. I mean, it's probably way before legal age of working. I think we were like, 10 or 11 out there with divot buckets filling the 18th fairway on the East Course with a bunch of kids. But, they're great memories of doing that. And a lot of people in my neighborhood, you probably may or may not know, actually got in the industry. It's amazing. Bob Bird, who grew up behind our houses where we grew up, our backyards touched. He even got in the industry. Bill Corcoran, so many people from my neighborhood got into it. And I reeled them all in to do divot work with me. So
imagine that in today's age. Like, I do not imagine any club being
it's
okay,
crazy.
being okay with like a bunch of kids just coming trailing and filling.
We just did it. It was like, I won't say it's like it was a regular thing, but there's definitely memories of doing it, and it was fun. It was like a fun thing, and I run into those guys and we laugh about those days doing that. But yeah, so I grew up doing that. I spent a decent amount of time on the East, but I also say, my father firmly put me on the West course, probably because he's like, we don't want this guy to destroy the course. So we'll put him on the West, and actually it was great. I love the West course. For those of you who know, Merion's two different courses. The East course is, of course, amazing work of art. But it does have Ardmore Avenue. It cuts it in half, and it's fairly exposed to the world. The West course is this bubble. It is landlocked, kind of. It's a beautiful course. Lives in the shadow of the East course, unfortunately. But if it was just the West course and there wasn't an East course, people would be amazed at that golf course. And it doesn't really get the props it should. It's an amazing course, and it was a wonderful place to grow up. Literally, we just did it all. I learned a lot more than I realized during those times. You just sort of absorb it by watching, year after year, different interns working side by side with different interns, and just watching them. And you kind of come out the other end of the tunnel as an adult and you realize, as I started getting back into the industry on the commercial side, I realized how much I really had internalized and didn't realize at the time. It was just part of what I did day in, day out. Again, it's how you ran the farm, right? So that's kind of my orientation. And I always say I had a 100% kitchen table education. Listening to my father, watching my father, and watching the interns. I got it. I did not have a turf degree at first. I went back later and got one. But so I went to Temple University for a communications degree, which is code for I'm going to be in sales, which is really what that was back then. They should just call it a sales degree. I knew that was my path. So, I knew that was a better role for me. I identify with a lot of these salespeople that called on my father. I kind of liked how supportive they were of the operation there. So anyway, so that's it. I went to college for communications, and Tyler, will tell you, kind of wrap this up. To, be honest, I had no interest in getting into turf business as I was going through college. I'd sort of reflected on the fact that I think there's enough Valentines in the turf business right now that I should probably try something else. Leading up to my grandfather's and father's reputation was like Herculean to think about. My older brother had gone down that path, so sort of the pressure was off me in a sense. And during that time, I was completely in another world. I played in a gloriously sloppy garage band in Philadelphia, and I was, we were playing all the dives in town. Totally loved it. Lived in a house with a bunch of musicians. We had a rehearsal studio set up in the basement, and I was thinking that, I'm like, okay, I'm going to give this a shot. So I wasn't thinking about turf. It wasn't until, several years later, after getting into sales in another industry, that I got a call from my father that made a lot of sense. And then I took a turn back into the sales side of this industry. Never looked back. It was 100% the right decision. Just fortunate of that phone call. So
you joked about, summertime vacations and things like that. Well, I would love to have those stories that you have of the time at Merion. I lived a very sheltered lifestyle. And our simple thing was my wife and I talk about this all the time. Like, do you remember like what we did as kids? And I just remember getting up, getting on a bike, driving around the neighborhood with my friends, going to the baseball field,
Yep,
play till the sun comes down, make sure you're home by 5 o'clock for dinner. In today's world, that doesn't exist of just like getting
exactly.
going with your friends and spending the whole day and not knowing what's actually going on.
Well, yeah, where they are, like, yeah, I say I kind of grew up in a Wonder Years type of neighborhood. I don't know if people know that reference, but basically, uh, you could literally get on your bike, go to the park, spend the whole day, and come back, and you're still alive. Your parents like, he's back. Um, but I did a lot of stuff where it would be not unusual, even as a little kid. I'd get a call. My father would call my mother and say, "Hey, the cart guy needs help. Bring him over here." And so like I'd come over again. I was probably 9, wiping down carts and stuff like that on the West Court, whatever we needed. So I sort of saw all aspects of it. And actually, this podcast, I won't do this to you because it's just there's too many stories to tell. But like I have amazing childhood stories of helping bring in the Merion Christmas tree as a kid. Having that watch that be delivered, putting it up, and helping decorating it and whatnot. And that was a really cool tradition. So I have, it was both a wonderful property that is married, and as far as, and then inside the clubhouse too, walking through that, I still have the smell of the clubhouse in my brain. Uh, or walking into the men's grill and seeing, the floorboards all dotted, speckled with cleats, where they were wearing that, and you could still see that, and it just great memories that I took for granted at the time, and now I reflect on and think like, how lucky am I? So
Well, I'm thinking you're probably sitting back and like, shoot, I wish I had a voice recorder or something like at those dinner tables because that'd be like a best-selling New York Times best-selling book today.
amazing. I first got in when I first got into sales with my father. We traveled a lot together, and as he would tell stories, I did write them down. One day, it just dawned on me, like, someday it's gonna be gone, and these stories will be gone if I don't start writing them down. So I started writing them down. And he started every story he told with, "That reminds me." So I already had the name of his memoir. It's going to be called "That Reminds Me." And they would just go right into these stories. Again, too numerous for us to go into now. But yeah, I do have a whole like legal pad, pages and pages, where we were driving around of different stories. I would say everything from just a specific thing about a member and maybe how they made their money to how they solved a problem on the golf course. So there's just it's a, you know, whole stratosphere of different stories floating around. So
I never asked you this, but and never really, I don't know, the opportunity never presented itself. But like, what was your dad like as a leader, as a superintendent? Like, how would you define that? How do you think people would define, and share who he was?
yeah, he put a tremendous amount of faith in his assistants. And at that point, and again, I think he really was maybe the number one nurturing of the internship program at Penn State. But once he selected who he was going to bring in, he didn't second guess himself. And usually there was like three assistants that sort of had equal responsibilities, and then one would be the official assistant. And I don't ever remember him saying, "Oh, I think I made a bad choice there. We got to make," like, once he got confidence, you were basically charged with running the golf course. My father at that point, he spent a lot of time working with the membership and on that side of it, and dealing with the membership coming in and having questions or complaints and whatnot, things like that. He spent a lot of time dealing with going up to the pro shop. Bill Kittleman, legendary pro there, working with Bill, talking about things going on the course, changes that were made, or again, complaints. So he did a lot of that on the agronomy side, which my father was putting him up against anybody. He was amazing. But he would, if there was a problem, he'd get pulled into it, help that that intern maybe work through that problem, help them solve that. But he basically said, "You're going to run this place." You know, he used to have a line like saying, "You have you have a chemical room full of chemicals, you have a pond full of water, you have a full crew of men, and we have a budget to make this happen. It's go do it." And they were really empowered then. So, some of them probably weren't prepared for that when they first started in the first week, but within a few weeks, man, they were in. And I think that was sort of caused a lot of quick growth there. Definitely instituted a lot. You had to learn quickly, but some amazing assistants that came out of there with my father. And so, you think you have Bill Jones, the Friars head, incredible. Where Bill's trajectory. Armin Sooney, came out of there. Some of the top jobs. Armin. You and Armin have a lot in common.
Yeah.
You, Charlie Carr. Just the list goes on and on of people that were, came through there and really went on a great. Other people on the crew. John Gaza, who just recently hosted, a tour event. So like to answer your question, he empowered his assistants to do what needed to be done. He was there to back them up on the agronomy side. I don't think he swung a big hammer there as far as, he wasn't a tyrant. But he'd pop in and pop out of different projects and problem solve and then get on his way. He was incredibly creative. He was my father could draw. When he started getting into the design part thing, he could draw a golf hole freehand amazingly. So he had like a creative vision on how the course, should be maintained or tweaked if it needed to be. But yeah, and people were very loyal to my father. So, I mean, they maintained contact with him right up until his death. And, we've heard this before, but it really was true. I would call him a surrogate father to most every intern that came through there. They would call him on his birthday. So yeah, he was well loved, but also, respected for his abilities.
Well, I think even transcending beyond the team is the membership and the club at Merion revered, obviously him and your grandfather, and which is pretty unique. And Marion's unique in that aspect that they really, if you look at all things between the relationship with Penn State, the championships that they've hosted and the pride that they have in that agronomy department, I think is something that I try to, in a weird way, try to really pass that on when we do search projects to make sure clubs value that agronomy department, because it really can make a difference in the quality of the club, quality of the golf experience. But that's something that I always kind of thought interesting, was how much they revered the members.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't think it was always that case. I mean, I remind people of this. My father was following his father, which was intimidating, right? And they were two very different personalities. My grandfather, and I don't have a lot of memories of him. He died when I was a little kid. I barely remember. He was kind of removed, quiet guy. When he talked, people leaned in, that type of thing. He was very kind of linear in his thinking, and people called him Mr. Valentine. So it was a very different thing. So he was an intimidating guy who, rightfully got a lot of respect because he accomplished a lot. My father was kind of coming in to fill his shoes, which was a big challenge, and so I think early on, I don't remember this early on because I was still a little kid, but I'm sure early on in those days that he was sort of probably on probation to see how this guy does. Can he be as good as the father? Think of someone like, think of Paul B. I mean, Paul B has certainly, established an awesome reputation in the industry. And there's generations now that don't even realize that his father was, Mount Rushmore of superintendents, right? So they they just think about him. So credit to him for establishing that. But man, don't think
You know
Yeah.
what's scary though? One of
Well,
my dear friends, we were on a call this week and we were talking about industry conferences and the kind of people that you'd want to see. And he says, isn't it crazy to think that this generation wouldn't even have the same perspective of the icons that we grew up, knowing, loving,
100%.
wanting to emulate? And he said it's a different model. When I talk to guys about whether you name Paul or John Zimmers or Russ Myers, you name it, whomever in any part,
Yeah.
some people would be like, "Who's that?" And it's like, what? No, that's not it. And we've got to continue to shepherd
Yeah.
steward those names,
Yeah.
pass it down generation
And
to generation.
and they established those reputations when there wasn't social media and
Yeah,
everybody heard everything at once. I mean, they established it because their reputations transcended any, all that. So yeah, again, like going back to that, there's a lot of different legacy people in the industry, and I'm sure the younger generation doesn't realize that the guy they're working for was actually he was his father was a superintendent. I mean, it's very prevalent in our industry. So,
we had a humble brag here, and trust me, like not even putting myself in any of those categories, truly. But I was at two uh, career development talks this past week, and one guy came up and was like, "Man, I've been following your podcast for the last 2 years. It's such an honor to meet you." And I'm like, "Really? I feel like I was just an intern literally not that long ago and still feel that way in many aspects." And it was just sort of like, man, social media has really changed the game uh,
changed the game.
in terms of the awareness around superintendents. And I know one of the things that you had sent me a note around was salary of what your father was
Oh yes,
making comparative to where we're at today. You think about just
crazy,
that kind of
crazy,
transition.
crazy change. And again, I don't mind talking about this in round numbers because I think enough time has passed. Hopefully, no one's offended. Most people are dead from their time anyway. So anyway, in my father's last year at Merion, he made $57,000, which is
Wow.
1989, right? 1989. Um, and that was a while ago, right? So it's not like it, but um, in Merion, at that point, Marion's roots are as like a Quaker club, and in that same sentence, when you say Quaker, you can say conservative, right? Um, when you drove through Marion's parking lot in the 70s, and again, I wasn't really driving in the 70s, but I'm saying if you drove through there, you would see uh, older, subdued cars, people held on their cars. But then there was a shift when you drive through that parking lot. Now, there's the flash hit there too. So generationally, it's very different. Is what I'm trying to say. Like, this money was not thrown around like that. Um, but I remember after my father retired, 89, and they took care of him like in a package afterwards, that too. But things are different compensation wise. The budget for the course, both courses, I think it was 725,000, right around $725,000 for both courses, which means the East got 500 and the West got what's left. Or no, the East got like 600,
Yeah.
and the West got 100 grand or 125 grand to do what they need to. Yeah, they got the scraps, and that's kind of how it rolled back then. I, the next year, and this is from memory, so someone can tell me later that I got this wrong, and I wouldn't push back too hard. The next year, I believe the budget went to 1,000,005 or 1,000,004. Yeah, 1,000,004 because it 2x, right? And my father, I remember saying when he heard that number a year or so afterwards, he's like, "All right, wait a minute, I ran this place for $700,000, and next year it goes to 1.4, like which isn't probably that much money today for running places, but at the time it was a shocker. I mean, imagine if your budget suddenly got 2x. So, things greatly changed. And then uh, Dick Bader came in after my father, and I believe, Bader, he he 2x and then some. I'm sure he came in. I don't know the exact figure, but I would doubt he came in for anything less than $200,000 or $150,000. In 1989, 1990, to put that in perspective. And so salaries right there were just supercharged during that. The end of that generation, my father was like the closing the book on the end of that generation of superintendents. It was a kind of a good pivot point in the industry. And then suddenly everybody was over 100,000, which was not the norm. That was like when you heard a superintendent in Philadelphia area was getting 100 grand, that got people's attention. We're certainly long past that number. But yeah, that was the end of a generation and that $725,000 or whatever it was. That was also everything was done in house. You weren't bringing in an outside contractor, a total turf or LeBar or anything that you were doing it. You had to do it with your team. And then suddenly you had a $1.4 million budget and you were bringing in outside help. So that was like a dramatic pivot point in the industry. It wasn't like gradual. It was like this guy is phasing out, this other guy's coming in. And I think there was probably pressure on the membership because they were making a big decision to bring somebody in, kind of changing this 80-year legacy of Valentine's there. Like, well, we got to make this work. We got to make sure that this person is fully, empowered money wise to do what we need to do to take the course of into another age, which was the right thing for them to do at the time. They need to go into the modern era, if you want to say.
I was talking again, it's kind of like in the same breath this week around consultants and how clubs use consultants. And it seems we are on a trajectory where there's specialized people for every really area, whether it's in agronomy, club management, all sorts of things. I think that has been an interesting change in the industry as a whole. Thinking about somebody that specializes in recruiting for
Yeah.
assistant superintendents, equipment managers, the different types of soil scientists, all different types of backgrounds and things like that. I think that's been a good thing in general, because it's not all on you, but maybe to some degree it's probably, I hate to use the word crippled maybe some of the development of people because they can lean on those experts. But I look at it as a positive that, hey, you can focus on your strengths as a superintendent and leverage other individuals to strengthen what you're doing.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing today that they have consultants on there. But it's really interesting you brought that up because I would say, mentioning again Bader, who in my generation, he was like the first superintendent that kind of transitioned into the consulting thing in a way that he gave a comprehensive, here's how we're going to do a redo here, or whatever their plan was. My father and other superintendents, like they might have gone and consulted on if they were having issues at the course, a certain thing with the hole, or maybe, how can we solve a disease problem? But Bader was the first one kind of like, other than the USGA, you really didn't have an outside consultant because nobody understood what you did. And today there's some of that too. So Bader and all of his, he was a different guy. He was kind of much for a different beat, but and a lot of people he offended a lot of people. But the one thing you can't deny is that he caused a major shift in compensation. Bader came in, maybe he stayed, maybe he placed somebody in his orbit in there, and that person made significantly more money than the person that was there before. So again, some people probably got offended by it, but the reality is on the other end of that, it really elevated the overall salaries. But he did it as maybe the first consultant that wasn't a USGA consultant. Other than that, the membership would hear what you had to say as a superintendent, and then, bring in the USGA, and they held those opinions equally. The way I see that, they held those two opinions equally. Oftentimes the USGA would say exactly what that superintendent has been telling them what they should do, and maybe they heard it differently from the USGA, so they did it. But it was the same advice. But that was probably the 90s is really when these outside consultants came in, and some of them being architectural consultants. So
Well, there's also been an evolution of the search in our industry for a successful sales profile, as you know, in that line of work that has evolved, and just the relationship with
well,
manufacturer, distributor,
yeah,
superintendent. Talk a little bit about what you've seen in that evolution.
yeah. There's a tremendous cost involved if you're a supplier, a distributor side, or a manufacturer. And this is true in any business, but just speaking to our business right now, there's a tremendous cost involved in bringing in a salesperson and getting them set up and putting them out on the road at the time. It's a little different now, obviously. And if if they realize in the first year, 18 months that they made a mistake or they're not working out and they got to go back and start over again, there's a tremendous loss of money, time, and, um, you know, companies are now doing a lot, or have been for years now, been doing a lot more disc profiling, going to outside consultants on making sure it's not just an across the table interview with someone who they think might be a good fit, but they're put through a rigorous, very methodical testing thing, as they should be, to get there. But that's been a difficult thing. I would say there was a lot of people on the sales side of our industry for years that, maybe after a run as a superintendent, they transitioned into the commercial side. And there's some great skill sets there that do translate. Consistency, perseverance, understanding what the customer's going through day in, day out, because having walked in their shoes, that's they can give you advantage, but it doesn't guarantee success. If you leave if you decide to leave as on the management side and get more on the commercial supplies side, does not mean success. I've seen people come into our industry, never went to turf school, never worked on a golf course, and be very successful in sales.
Mm-hmm.
It's a skill set that you maybe you innately have it and then you nurture that and that allows them. But yeah, it's changed a lot. And trying to find people. I mean, I've seen companies hold on to salespeople who are maybe underperforming and have been for years, but they don't want to go through the pain of letting that person go and then trying to find somebody else, because it is painful. Trying to get someone launched into a territory. Some of that's changing, but we know that
Yeah.
that's the case.
You'll get a kick out of this. I remember, for those that are on this call, when I first started the company back 6 years ago, I remember talking with you about sales training in general for myself. And I went through a couple of self-paced,
Yeah,
Sandler training being kind of the gold star
yeah,
program, which was fantastic. I actually just read a book. It's fantastic. And it's not from anybody I don't think you would know. It's called The Miracle Hour. Um,
hmm.
I'll have to send you a copy of it.
Yeah, I don't know that.
The author name's Kelly Roach. She actually was a former Philadelphia Eagles cheerleader,
Huh.
but it's a really good book, simple, easy to read, very practical. And it's really founded on relationship building and leveraging your existing assets and
Yeah,
just connectivity with people, like being able to just engage with people in a normal conversation versus going into it with this high pressured sort of, what most probably people think of salesy, is this, scam artist
yeah,
trying to upsell you every time
yeah.
they meet you.
There's no, there is not a set personality that guarantees success for that. You may have a predisposition to be able to be very comfortable in social situations and, get people to talk, and that can be helpful. But I've seen salespeople that were introverted, if you want to use that, or label that, to the point where they almost don't say anything in the sales meeting. And some of them do very, very well. So if there was one, you know, if there was a profile that worked, everybody would do it, but they're very different. I Just like if you have an innate ability to run a golf course, it can take you so far, but then you better get some education, right?
Yeah.
Same thing for sales. You may get into it, fine, you're doing well for it, but if you don't go back and sharpen the sword and learn other ways to kind of get through roadblocks in sales, you're not going to get very far. So it's like anything. It's like a natural athlete. Be a natural athlete, but it helps to have coaching, right? And so you got to think of it that way. It's more like coaching, and that's a continuing education thing too. It's not just, hey, I graduated, I'm done. You want to have that.
100%. I mean, I've got pages of notes. I was looking back from like 2 years ago of what we would use, not for talk scripts, but just discussion points when you meet somebody you never knew, or if you're trying to re-engage with somebody previously that you did business with. And I'm like laughing and thinking, wow, how evolved in 2 years our approach and my style is. And I love it, man. Listen, part of me is like, maybe I should have been a salesman from the start. Oh, because I just love it. It's like it's a competition, like it's an internal competition for myself. Like I'm not necessarily motivated by uh external things. I'm more internally driven, and that's just there's just something about that. It's no different than making a placement. Every time we make a placement, it's a shot of dopamine, because it's sort of like the challenge that you start a project,
Right.
you close the project, and no different than in a conversation with different clients and things of that. And ultimately, at the end of it, it's, hey, can I help this person get a result they're looking for? If not, then we're not the right fit.
There's an opportunity in our industry, and I'm going to go back to Penn State for obvious reasons because there's a kind of a connection there. Where like I went back, as I mentioned earlier, I went back and got my master's in professional studies, the MPS. I did the MPS program, and I did it at age 50.
Wow.
I some people are like, you're going back, why are you going back? I'm like, felt like I felt like I owed it to the industry. I felt blessed and fortunate that I had the career I was having. And, but I also felt like I'm going to stand up in front of superintendents and tell them about products and different things that I really should, support that with the education behind it. So I did that. Purpose of saying that's like, yeah, it took me several years to do it. It was a big commitment, time wise, even, and financial wise, but it made me realize I was so much better on the commercial side having done that. I think there's an opportunity for Penn State and other turf schools to have a program to take a person who may be in sales but doesn't have a turf background and kind of put them like through a quick start type program so they can get a much broader background on be it irrigation, pesticides, or soil biology, whatever that may be, whatever niche they're in, um, and their salespeople would be a lot better, lot more empowered and more successful, in my opinion, if they took that path. So I thought about that. Could be a really good thing for turf schools if they offered sort of a short program to put salespeople through to help them with the education and the background of dealing with who they're dealing with on a day in, day out basis.
Yeah, it's so funny you say that. One of the things that I've done for myself and share resources within our team, um, but really revolves around like um, educating them on the industry so they can become more familiar with the industry as a whole. And so when they're talking with candidates, they're talking to superintendents, they can speak on a intellectual level with them and have
Right.
a conversation. So no different than that. Um, when you think of what's the difference between a sales call in 1996 versus today, what does that look like?
It's a good year you threw out there, Tyler, because kind of like right now, it's sort of where I am in my career. Technically got back into sales in 1996. I'd spent several years in another totally different industry in advertising, became an advertising manager, did that for several years after college. Was successful and I enjoyed it, but then I realized I was trapped in an office all day and I really missed being outside. And so I ended up having an opportunity to go back into this side and take what I learned in sales from that. But in 1996, you got in your truck and you drove around and you did the milk run and you visited your customers and you tried to stay on a regular rotation with them, and it was belly to belly sales, literally, right? You had your catalog, and that's how you sold. You had to get out there and do it. You weren't the mantra back then was like, you're not selling anything by sitting at your desk, get on the road. Um, and there was sort of the end of the time where you took superintendents out to lunch. Like that doesn't happen anymore. No one has time for that. Certainly not superintendents, and salespeople don't either. But gone are those days where you pull in, hey, let's go down the road. We'll have, spend an hour and a half, 2 hours going through. Like no one can do that. Things started to change as technology came in, and I'd say it was accelerated tremendously by like once COVID, COVID effect, if you want to call. Suddenly, we all had to figure out how to sell differently when we couldn't come in there. And generationally, with technology, I can remember a moment just prior to COVID, a few years before COVID, where I thought it was a really inflection point in selling. There was a guy who I was working with, Seth Greenwood, who actually runs the University of Delaware campus. Has had a great career, but he was in sales with us at the time. I was at Cinetech, and I remember him saying, "Hey, I sold so and so's course on their whole pre-emergent program yesterday." I'm like, "Great, how'd that go?" "Yeah, I sold it last night." It's like, "So what do you mean you sold it last night?" He's like, "Yeah, I was on like Madden. I was gaming with him, and in between the game, I don't pretend to understand what I'm even talking about this. I'm not a gamer. Like he said, "Hey, by the way, tell me again about what," and they had this exchange while gaming. And next thing you know, he has like I don't know, 5, 6 pallet order of pre-emerged fertilizer going somewhere. And I'm thinking, wow, like this guy just made a sale via a gaming console. Like things, and this is 12 years ago, probably. And that's when I thought, like, okay, our end user is changing, and how they communicate is changing, and we can either get on board with this and figure out other ways to do this, or you're going to just be the woolly mammoth and left in the dust here. You got to figure it out. And so COVID, as everyone knows, and I'm not going to harp on that, that changed how we communicate. I mean, you were getting big orders from a text message, which would seem super like inappropriate, even though you had text, you're like, I can't ask this guy but boom, all this thing started to transact that way, and it made sense, and it was expedient, and we've kind of never looked back. Amazing because of COVID, it wasn't gradual. It was like, boom, figure out another way.
Yeah.
And we figured out another way. So,
we deal with the same thing on our side. I feel like I still have like a traditionalist approach in many aspects to the recruiting process. Nothing's better than picking up a phone and having a conversation with somebody. But I'll tell you what, everybody's busy, and it's not inappropriate anymore to send a text message to a candidate or an employer to say, hey, can you check in on this? Or do you have time today, versus a formal pick up the phone and call or an email. So that even the sales process or buying process in our line of work has changed. That text message, DMs on LinkedIn or Instagram
yeah,
are kind of like socially acceptable now. I think
100%.
one thing I want to really highlight for, your company, Aquatrols, you guys have done a fantastic job of building a really nice digital presence with your turf zooms. Just in general, your content, it's not overwhelming. It's like the right amount. And I appreciate that, because I think that's a different way to engage with professionals and industry
Yeah.
people.
Aquatrols has always been really ahead of the curve on marketing in general. And they embrace social media immediately. And I think you got one of the social media awards at one point, Tyler, way back when. And and there you go. We superintendent just starting out, and you got it. But they've been ahead of the curve. Colleen Clifford runs the marketing there, and she's, they see where things are going and get out in front of it quickly. Um, I want to go back to the sales call thing because it sort of speaks to, do relationships matter anymore? Or is it you have the technology, I want it, get it here as fast as possible. Um, and I don't even need to see a person. And the right answer is yes to both. It's a balance now. I mean, if you get overly hung up and say relationships are all that matter, you would be wrong. Make the argument that relationships don't matter and it's just a transactional thing now, the superintendent sees everything they need to know about a product online or wherever, you would be wrong too. So, like a lot of things in life, it's about balance, right? And I can say that because even today, here's how I can tell you how relationships matter. I've seen people in territories, and I'm talking distributors now, DSRs, distributor sales reps. I've seen a rep go into a territory that wasn't doing well. It's the same people. A guy before, a woman before was calling on, same products, and I see them do very well where the person before hadn't been. And it's relationship, but it's also having the skills to understand the needs there. And that's not something, you know, AI, at least that right now, is going to be able to pick up on. So relationships do matter. You got to nurture those. When the heat of the battle's on, you're not going to be able to pull somebody off the course and do something. But I still see people in the off season. I see people take their customers out on fishing trips or to, football game or wherever a golf getaway. And it's starting to happen. It's coming back now. There was sort of nothing for years, but it's coming back. And I see more of that. And they're pretty strong salespeople who are doing that. So that part of it does matter. If you're going to be in the running, you better have the right product and and be in a budget lane that makes sense. But all of this matters, not one or the other. But the relationships in our industry still matter. I'll call out a person who I'm not saying I'm super close with, but I've watched his career. A guy named Jim Masone in Long Island. Masone he's kind of on the Mount Rushmore of salespeople. He he's done an amazing job with relationships, but he also works his ass off. I mean, he's up and out of the house at 4:30, and he makes his runs as superintendent. They know he's coming. He's bringing value adds for about new products. He's has experience on where things worked and didn't work. Heavily relationship based too, but also he's kept the sword sharpened on information and bringing value that way too. So it still matters. If you took somebody like Jim Masone out of the picture up in Long Island, there'd be a giant void. The companies that are working through someone like him would not do the business they're doing now. Simply put, yeah,
It's interesting. I'm into a whole bunch of things with AI and how to leverage AI within your business. And there's a lot of talks about, how different companies use AI to connect with people and it's all good. But
yeah,
I look at it as it supplements behind the front facing connectivity with somebody, and it can
yeah,
help support behind the scenes, not being the leading part of the interaction and engagement. So, and I think that that's something that people need to really think about, is that human relationship connectivity is still really prevalent in this industry, because that's how a lot of business is done, is a one-to-one face-to-face kind of interaction and engagement. So I think it's funny you said about people starting to come back to give golf trips or taking customers out to lunches. I
yeah.
think that those touch points are so critical. And we do a fair share of that in our own unique way. So I appreciate the fact that you said that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, in the heat of the battle, those, whatever you want to call it, the 100 days of hell, when the weather hits in the Northeast, I'll say you're not going to get somebody off property. But in the off season, if you can build that relationship with the right activity and the right, event. So no doubt.
What did we miss that we didn't talk about that This feels like a really good segment, man. We should do this like every month. Sharing wisdom. We're sharing wisdom.
And wisdom. All right, I've never been accused of being wise, but I appreciate you saying that. I feel like I still have a lot to learn. Um, but what did we miss? Hmm. All right, well, okay. I'll say here's what we missed. I'll talk. I did. I spent my entire career on the commercial side. I think for young people coming out of school today, um, not everyone is probably uh, maybe made to go into the role as a turf manager. And I wouldn't. They shouldn't look at that as any sort of failure or difference. Like that we work in an ecosystem of where the sales support and commercial side, and when I say commercial side, I mean the science, the tech support, and all that, and the superintendent. Or there's this whole interdependency there, and if you get the right balance there, you can be very successful in whatever role you're in. But I think the commercial side uh, has been so uh, maybe underappreciated for years. It's starting to change that right now. But there's great career opportunities for young people coming out who want to do that, who want to be more supportive of maybe another program and another course, and that it's it's a it's a calling that they shouldn't resist. You know, there's a role to do that. I knew even growing up immersed in Merion, which if I've had people say, "Hey, why didn't you want to ever become a superintendent?" I just knew from watching people. I watch guys call my father, and I'm like, I really like what that person's doing. I love the idea too that they were visiting on multiple courses, and that appealed to me. But I liked how integral they were to their success of the course. When there was an issue, my father had certain suppliers that he would call, and he knew something would be there when he needed it, or he'd get an answer about a product he needed to get an answer on. And so it wasn't, you know, uh, it wasn't an us against them type of thing. It was there was a unity there of success. And so I think the commercial side of our industry um, deserves to deserves the props there of being very, very important in the success of our industry.
Yeah, I appreciate that. One of the things that I've been really fascinated with as we've in the 6 years is the diversity of opportunities in this career. And what you start out as may not be where you ultimately end up. And it's hard because I have very two conflicting thoughts around this is one, you got to set an impossible goal for yourself so you know where you're focused, know where you're targeted, and you can kind of work towards that. But on the same token, within that, there are, as with my own career journey, there's ups and downs and different avenues that come and different influences that come at certain points that you say, you know what, I like that. I'd like to do something more like that. And you spoke about somebody early on, Armin Suni, um, that I really just appreciated as someone coming up trying to get to that next job and how I think selfless is probably a good word. Armin was with really kind of giving me guidance. Um, and really looked at what he was doing and thought, wow, that's really cool. I'd like to be able to do something like that and maybe just support superintendents and recruiting assistants, equipment managers, line level staff. And, so that changed my trajectory where I was on a path maybe to hopefully
Yeah,
superintendent at that next level club. So, I think that there's clearly what we've seen on the recruiting side, man, so many different opportunities working with different exhibitors, and different positions, even within those companies, sports turf, landscape. Man, shoot, we just recently did a landscape manager position for a national historic cemetery. All right, this
hmm,
place is up in
yeah,
Brooklyn. It's fantastic.
hmm,
And I just thought, man, it's such a cool, different opportunity that people probably don't even think about.
yep. Now uh, there's a lot of places you can go with that turf degree beyond the golf course. Sports field has exploded in the last 10, 15 years of people going in there with great, education, which was not always the case on that side of our industry. Lawn care, like you said, huge. The yeah, yeah. Think about now how different of a superintendent you would be having gone through what you've gone through. So there are people that go into sales and then go back into being man. I watch. I just mentioned one, Seth Greenwood. He's great, that way. There's other people I've spoken to have known over the years who are like, if I didn't spend those 5 years in sales, there's no way I would have been the superintendent I am today. Like, because people have done that, jump in, and you get a perspective on the industry. Again, just think how different you would be as a superintendent. You were already good and had a lot of great mentoring coming up through the clubs you were at, but knowing what you know now, you think about that. Yeah.
I'm writing this in reminder for myself because that's a great podcast topic, because I do get that question where we'll have candidates that have come from being outside of a superintendent for, a number of years, and they want to get back in. And how do you go about that? And what are the opportunities that you come back in? Because it's hard. It's hard for the members at those clubs to be able to qualify what this person's doing when they've been out of I hate to say been out of the game a little bit,
Yeah.
and
I,
you have that trust to make sure that that person can come in, assimilate quickly. It's a big decision no matter what level of club you're at.
in my opinion, okay, okay, just my opinion here. If I'm a Greens chairman and I'm interviewing somebody who spent 3 or 5 years in sales, had been a superintendent or was on that trajectory for a while, and then went that pass and then went back in, I'm thinking this person knows who to talk to for products, how to buy, how to do budgeting, has now seen the other side of the industry, again, the other side of that ecosystem in a way that could only bring value to the club. Like that's, to me, that would be amazing that you're bringing in that skill set. You haven't just been in the bubble, just in the tunnel of turf management. You've actually got to see the commercial side because I'm thinking, sorry, I'm going to put words in your mouth. I'm thinking you'd be like, I might even buy differently. I know how to buy differently now, or maybe what products you buy differently, but you know how to structure things. There's a whole, there's a whole education when you're on the commercial side that probably changes the whole complexion of how you'd run your course now. I would see that as nothing but a benefit that you saw on both sides, and you're bringing that into an organization. And I'm thinking that person would be this guy or woman is going to be able to buy in a way more efficiently that they may not have had they not had that experience.
That's a
So
great, that's a
yeah,
great point. A different skill set that certainly probably doesn't get talked about enough in the ability as a business manager and thinking about purchasing across the board, not just chem for wetting agents, equipment,
right.
soil, seed, whatever the case may
You're
be.
running a business, right? So you're bringing a whole set of business skills that the other candidates may not have. So
Yeah, and I think of from my lens, and I try to impart this when we meet with assistants and interns, and go do site visits at clubs, is here's kind of a template for what your members are looking at, and that's been built off of listening to members in all these search processes. So, like for me, it would have been way more focused on the basics and the fundamentals and the detail, and then making sure that that's being imparted to the assistants. And hey, at your end of the day, make sure we go through and wrap up by taking this template, go hole by hole, write the list down of the extracurricular things that need to be done, because that's the difference of what they're looking for. They're not necessarily focused in on what soil sprays need to be put out, even those are important. They're not
yeah,
just on some of the things that I think most of us have focused on. I think that there's a level of attention to detail and small details that goes such a long way that they may forgive a little bit of brown, a little bit of inconsistencies and turf conditions in areas, um, if they see the details are being done.
yeah. I mean, you're at these elite clubs. If you're a member there, you're probably a business owner, or you've probably risen in the ranks of businesses. So being able to demonstrate that skill, and having a little bit of a commercial background and approach it from strictly a business standpoint and a little less agronomy in that part of the interview, this can only be a benefit for someone, you know, to be able to bring that in.
Well, I appreciate you taking some time with me here this morning, and maybe sometime soon we'll be able to enjoy a beverage up in State College.
Absolutely. Got to get up there. Maybe get for
We've enjoyed the transition. I'll be at the field day coming up in August. Um, So I feel like even for me, it's been a nice integration back into the university and sort of invigorated about where the industry's going with just some of the youth and the students that are there and just their curiosity. Man, it really kind of humbles you sometimes of recognizing like what where those people are at in their formative years and the kind of coaching and information they're looking for to set themselves up for a long-standing
Yeah,
career. So it's been fun being back at the university.
I can imagine. It's great. You're there, you're watching people at the birth of their career, and so it's gotta be really cool to look at that mindset. And, as the years go on, Kyle, you'll be able to say, "I remember watching that person graduate and now look at them." Like, you'll watch that evolution.
I had that
Uh,
experience yesterday. Saw a
mm,
senior assistant at a really top level club who I remember being in the 2-year program and going up there and speaking to, 6, 7 years ago. And I'm thinking,
mm,
this is really awesome.
it's great. You have front row seat.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Leadership on the Links. For more leadership insights and industry expertise, connect with us at bloomgolfpartners.com or follow us on social media sites LinkedIn and Instagram. If you enjoyed this episode of Leadership on the Links, we'd be thrilled if you'd leave a review or share it with someone who you know would get some value. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to stay updated. Thanks for joining us today.